The acrid smell of disinfectant couldn't mask the underlying scent of desperation that permeated Port Renos refugee station. I'd grown accustomed to both over the 3 years I'd served as the station's makeshift medical officer. The cramped medical tent, with its patched synthetic walls and flickering artificial lights, had become my sanctuary and my prison. Outside, the simulated sky projection flickered again, another power fluctuation. The station administrators kept promising to fix it, but we all knew resources were allocated to more pressing concerns, like keeping the oxygen recyclers functioning, or ensuring the water purifiers didn't fail completely. I ran my thumb over the torn edge of my sleeve where my Interstellar Medical Corps insignia had once been sewn. 3 years, and the habit remained. The Corps had made their position clear when they'd stripped me of my rank and certification. Disobeying a direct evacuation order to remain with civilian casualties was unacceptable, regardless of how many lives it saved. Officer Teller says there's another transport arriving tomorrow, Merrick mentioned as he organized the meager medical supplies we'd managed to scrounge this week. Merrick wasn't medically trained, just a teenager who'd lost his parents in the Telmac massacre and somehow ended up at my door, volunteering to help. "Don't call me officer," I reminded him automatically. "And tell Teller I need more antibiotics if he expects me to keep treating his guards when they catch whatever's going around the Eastern Quadrant." Merrick nodded and slipped out through the tent flap, leaving me to finish inventory. The numbers were grim. We had enough painkillers for maybe 2 more weeks, assuming no major injuries. The bandages could stretch a month if I washed and reused them against all proper medical protocols. That's when I noticed them. They huddled in the shadow beside the supply crates, a woman and 2 children. The woman's posture was rigid despite her obvious exhaustion, one arm wrapped protectively around the smaller child while the older one pressed against her side. All 3 wore clothing that had seen better days, tattered fabric in once vibrant colors now dulled by dirt and wear. They weren't from this morning's transport. I'd processed those arrivals myself. The woman's eyes met mine, and something in them struck me. Not just fear or desperation. Those were common enough in Port Renos, but a fierce determination that seemed at odds with her trembling hands. "This is a restricted area," I said, my voice gentler than the words themselves. Protocol demanded I report unauthorized persons immediately. Protocol could go to hell. "Please," she whispered, her accent marking her as Yuzian, one of the species hardest hit when their home world was decimated in the final year of the war. "My children, they haven't eaten in 2 days." The smaller child, a boy, I thought, whimpered softly, and the woman tightened her embrace. "How did you get in here?" I asked, already moving toward my personal rations stashed behind the medication cabinet. "Through the drainage channel," the older child answered before her mother could stop her. "Mama said we had to be very quiet." I handed the woman a nutrient bar, watched as she broke it meticulously into 3 pieces, giving the largest portions to her children before taking the smallest for herself. "You'll need registration chips to stay in the station," I said. "Otherwise, security will." "They won't give us registration," the woman interrupted, her voice barely audible. "Not without," she swallowed hard, "not without a male guardian. They said I was worthless without a male to vouch for me." Something cold settled in my chest. It wasn't the first time I'd heard of such practices. Some species' cultural norms had only hardened in the crucible of war and displacement. Unofficial policies that discriminated against widows, especially those with mixed heritage children like these appeared to be, had become commonplace even as authorities looked the other way. The girl, perhaps 7 or 8 by human standards, looked up at me with eyes too old for her face. "Are you going to make us leave?" I thought of Telmac, of the children I'd managed to save and the ones I hadn't, of the oath I'd taken, not just to the Corps, but to myself. "No," I said, making a decision that would change everything. "Come inside, all of you." The woman hesitated only briefly before gathering her children and following me deeper into the medical tent. "I'm Adrian," I told them, securing the entrance behind us. "And you're going to stay here tonight." The war might have ended years ago, but some battles were still being fought in places like Port Renos. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was back on the right side of one. The smaller medical bay in the rear of my tent was barely large enough for a single cot, but it offered privacy and, most importantly, security sensors that I'd long ago modified to show only my presence. I cleared away diagnostic equipment to make space for the family. "You can rest here," I said, pulling out the emergency thermal blankets I kept for patients in shock. "It's not much, but it's warm." The woman sat perched on the edge of the cot, her posture still tense, but her children climbed onto it gratefully. The boy, who couldn't have been more than 4, curled immediately into a tight ball, while his sister remained vigilant. One hand clutching what I now saw was a tattered fabric doll. "Thank you," the woman said, her voice formal. "I am Suri of House Talaris." She hesitated before adding, "Former House Talaris." I offered a ration pack and a steaming cup of purified water. "These are better than the nutrient bars. Actual synthesized protein." Suri accepted them with practiced dignity, again dividing everything meticulously between her children before herself. I noticed her hands, elegant 6-fingered hands typical of Yuzians, but with calluses that spoke of recent hard labor. "Your children need medical attention," I observed quietly, noting the boy's pallor and the girl's too thin frame. "Nerio has had a fever," Suri admitted, stroking the boy's hair with gentle fingers. "And Tila," she glanced at her daughter, "we haven't had proper rations in weeks." I retrieved my diagnostic scanner, moving slowly to avoid frightening them. "May I?" After Suri's nod, I ran the scanner over both children, confirming what I suspected: malnutrition, mild dehydration, and in Nerio's case, a respiratory infection that thankfully responded to standard antibiotics. "He'll be better by morning," I promised, administering the medication through a painless dermal applicator. "Both of them need rest and regular meals, though." "We won't impose beyond tonight," Suri said firmly. "I heard there are agricultural settlements on the Western continent that accept unregistered workers." "And how would you get there?" I asked. "The intercontinental transports require registration." Suri's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, the same determination I'd noticed earlier. "We will find a way." "We always do." The girl, Tila, spoke up unexpectedly. "Your badge is scratched out." She pointed to my sleeve. "Did you do something bad?" "Tila," Suri admonished. I found myself smiling faintly. "No, not bad. Just against orders." I hesitated, then decided on the truth, or part of it. I was supposed to evacuate a medical facility, but there were still patients who needed help. "So you stayed," Tila concluded with the simple logic of a child. "So I stayed," I agreed. "And now I work here instead of with the Corps." "Were you punished?" Tila persisted, ignoring her mother's attempts to quiet her. My hand moved instinctively to the scar on my throat, the result of shrapnel during the bombardment that followed my decision to remain at the Telmac outpost. In some ways, I admitted, but I also found something important. "What?" "That sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules." Suri's gaze met mine, a new understanding passing between us. "A difficult lesson," she said softly. "One I've learned recently as well." As Nerio's breathing eased into the deeper rhythm of sleep, I noticed Tila's eyelids growing heavy despite her obvious effort to stay alert. "Your children are safe here," I told Suri. "You should rest too." She shook her head. "I cannot. Not yet." "Then tell me how you came to Port Renos," I suggested, keeping my voice casual as I organized supplies, giving her the space to decide how much to share. For a long moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice almost too low to hear, "My husband was a scholar at the great University of Uzia. When the coalition forces came, they claimed he had shared research with human scientists." Her fingers traced invisible patterns on the blanket covering her sleeping son. Such collaboration was deemed treason. The implications were clear. During the war, supposed collaborators were rarely granted trials. "The children?" I asked gently. "My husband was human," she answered, a note of defiance entering her voice. "Mixed unions were once celebrated on Uzia as symbols of the enlightened path. After the occupation," she didn't need to finish. "I'd seen how quickly tolerance could vanish when fear and hatred took hold. They took everything, Suri continued. Our home, our status. They said a widow without a male guardian had no standing, no right to property or protection. Her chin lifted slightly. They would have taken my children too, placed them in re-education centers because of their mixed heritage. So you ran. So I ran, she confirmed, with only what we could carry. It took everything we had to secure passage on transport. Her expression hardened. The captain took our last credits, then abandoned us here rather than at the central registry station as promised. The story was all too familiar. Port Renos existed in a bureaucratic gray area, technically under coalition jurisdiction, but remote enough that authorities rarely bothered with proper oversight. A perfect dumping ground for refugees without proper documentation or means. You need registration, I said, thinking aloud. Without it, you're vulnerable to deportation or worse. Yes, Suri agreed. But as I said, they don't grant registration to unaccompanied females of certain species, particularly not Yuzian widows with mixed heritage children. An idea began forming in my mind. Dangerous, potentially career-ending if I still had a career to end. But looking at the sleeping children and their exhausted mother, I knew I couldn't turn away. What if you weren't unaccompanied? I asked carefully. Suri's eyes widened slightly as she understood my implication. You would, she stopped, reassessing me. Why would you risk yourself for strangers? I thought of Telmac again, of the faces of those I couldn't save, of the nightmares that still woke me gasping for breath. Because I'm tired of following rules that hurt people, I said simply, and because no one should be called worthless because of who they are or aren't connected to. Suri studied me with an intensity that seemed to pierce straight through to my core. Finally, she nodded once. We will discuss it tomorrow, she conceded, after the children have rested. As if the decision had released something within her, she finally allowed herself to settle beside her children, though still sitting upright, back straight in a posture that spoke of ingrained discipline. Sleep, I urged gently. I'll keep watch. And I did, through the long night cycle, as the simulated sky outside flickered from darkness to false dawn, bringing with it the promise of difficult decisions and dangerous possibilities. But for the first time since Telmac, I felt something I'd nearly forgotten. Purpose. Morning in Port Renos announced itself with the harsh blare of the ration distribution siren. I watched as Suri startled awake, instinctively gathering her still sleeping children closer. It's just the morning signal, I assured her, offering a cup of the synthetic coffee substitute that was the closest thing to a luxury in the station. There's time before anyone comes by. Suri accepted the cup with a nod of thanks, her eyes taking in our surroundings with the calculated assessment of someone accustomed to evaluating escape routes. The children stirred gradually. Nerio's color noticeably improved after the night's medication. Your son's fever has broken, I said, running the scanner over him again. The infection is responding well. Some of the tension left Suri's shoulders. Thank you. Tila sat up, rubbing her eyes. Is there food? She asked. Hope and wariness mingled in her expression. I produced the morning rations I'd already prepared, synthesized protein cubes and hydration packs that were standard fare in the station. Not particularly tasty, but nutritionally complete. As the family ate, with the same careful portioning I'd observed the night before, I outlined what I'd been considering through the sleepless hours. Registration checks happen at the distribution centers each morning, I explained. Security has been increasing patrols since the coalition announced they're streamlining refugee processes, which really means they're preparing for mass deportations of anyone without proper documentation. Suri's expression remained neutral, but her fingers tightened around her cup. How long do we have? Not long. Maybe days before they reach this sector. I hesitated, then continued. There's a way you could qualify for registration and resettlement priority. Family unification protocols. You're suggesting a facade of marriage, Suri stated flatly. Not a question. I nodded. On paper only. It would give you and your children protected status and access to the resettlement transports leaving for Ellen 3. Ellen 3. Tila perked up. Is that a real planet with a real sky? It is, I confirmed. One of the outer colony worlds, newly reopened for settlement. Far enough from coalition central authority that the bureaucracy runs on actual need rather than arbitrary rules. And what would you gain from this arrangement? Suri asked, ever practical. A fair question. Medical personnel are prioritized for resettlement, but I've been discouraged from applying because of my history with the Corps. Your status as a widow with dependent children would override that if we registered as a family unit. It wasn't the whole truth. The truth was that I'd been voluntarily remaining at Port Renos as a form of self-imposed penance, believing I deserved no better after Telmac. But something about this family had awakened a long-dormant desire to do more than just exist. Before Suri could respond, the entrance sensor chimed, alerting me to an approaching visitor. I gestured for the family to remain in the back area and went to intercept whoever was coming. Officer Teller, a thin man with perpetually suspicious eyes, stood at the threshold of my medical tent, flanked by 2 security guards. Adrian, he acknowledged stiffly. I need your signature on the morning report. Of course, I replied, deliberately blocking his view into the tent as I accepted the datapad he offered. Any particular reason for the escort? Usually Merrick handles the paperwork. Teller's eyes narrowed slightly. New directive. All station personnel need updated security verification, particularly those with anomalous access patterns. I kept my expression neutral as I signed the report. My patterns aren't anomalous. I work the night cycle because patients don't stop needing care when the lights dim. Nevertheless, Teller continued, there's been concern about unregistered individuals finding ways into secure areas. We've authorized additional scans. Something cold settled in my stomach. Medical facilities are exempt from routine scanning under Privacy Protocol 713. I reminded him, grateful for my memory of regulations. Patient confidentiality. Teller looked like he wanted to argue, but the regulations were clear. Fine. But be aware that anyone without proper registration will be subject to immediate deportation when found. The transport arrived with new directives from Central. Noted, I replied, keeping my tone professional while mentally calculating how quickly I needed to move up our plans. After they departed, I returned to find Suri standing just inside the doorway to the back room, clearly having overheard everything. How soon can we register this? Arrangement? She asked without preamble. Today, I said, but once it's done, there's no going back. The authorities will assume we're genuinely together. She studied me with those penetrating eyes. Why are you really doing this? The truth. I thought of deflecting, but found I couldn't. Not with her. Telmac wasn't just a medical facility, I admitted. It was a shelter for children orphaned in the bombing of Sector 7. My orders were to evacuate the medical staff only. The children were to be processed separately. I knew what that meant. The words felt raw in my throat. I stayed, tried to get them out, but the bombardment came too soon. The memory of flames, of small hands reaching toward me as ceilings collapsed, threatened to overwhelm me. I pushed it back with practiced effort. How many survived? Suri asked softly. 17. I answered. Out of 43. Not enough. And the Corps punished you for trying. They punished me for disobeying. The fact that I saved anyone at all is why I'm here instead of in a detention center. I met her gaze directly. I can't save those children, but maybe I can help yours. Suri was silent for a long moment. Then, with quiet dignity, my people have a saying, the path walked in sorrow often leads to unexpected light. She straightened her shoulders. Very well. For my children's sake, I accept your proposal. But understand this. They said I was worthless without a male. But my children need you, human. Not just your protection, but what you represent. Hope that not all systems are corrupt, that some still stand for what is right. Her words hit with surprising force. It had been a long time since anyone had seen me as a source of hope rather than a cautionary tale. Then let's get started, I said. We have registrations to forge and a future to claim. The Central Registry Office, a grandiose name for what amounted to a converted storage unit with 3 desks, was crowded as always. Refugees from a dozen different species formed queues that snaked around the perimeter, all clutching whatever documentation they'd managed to salvage. I'd come prepared. My medical credentials, tarnished as they were, still granted me certain privileges. I dressed Suri and the children in clean clothes borrowed from the medical supply, technically meant for patients but easily repurposed. More importantly, I'd created temporary medical profiles for them in the system, establishing a clear record of their presence under my care. Stay close, I murmured as we approached the desk of Administrator Volume 50, a heavy-set bureaucrat whose boredom was his most distinctive feature. Let me do the talking. Volume 50 barely looked up from his screen as we approached. Purpose, he drawled. Family registration and unification. I stated clearly, sliding over my identification card. Medical Officer Adrian, requesting formal registration for my family unit. That got his attention. His eyes flicked from me to Suri and the children, lingering on their clearly Yuzian human features. Didn't know you had family, Adrian. Recent reunification, I replied smoothly. They were separated during the evacuation of Lower Yuzia. I've only just located them through the cross-species reunion network. It was a plausible enough story. The CSRN was notoriously backlogged, with families sometimes finding each other years after displacement. Vol's expression suggested skepticism, but his desire to return to his previous state of minimal effort won out. Documentation. I presented the file I'd prepared. Medical records establishing my connection to the children through carefully worded treatment authorizations, residential assignment forms showing shared quarters, a fiction I need to rectify later, and character references from 2 station staff who owed me favors for off-the-record medical care. Volume 50 scrolled through the file, his expression growing increasingly bored. Exactly what I'd hoped for. The more mundane the paperwork appeared, the less likely he was to scrutinize it closely. The woman needs genetic verification, he finally said, not bothering to address Suri directly. Coalition Directive 317 requires proof of legitimate union for cross-species registration. I had anticipated this. Medical Override Protocol 422B, I countered. Genetic verification is contraindicated for individuals with compromised immune systems due to Sector 7 radiation exposure. The lie was calculated carefully. Sector 7 exposure was common enough to be believable, but rare enough that few administrators had the specific training to question it. More importantly, the required verification would involve accessing central databases that would immediately flag Suri's actual marital history. Found it. I need to see the medical restriction documentation. I produced another document from my folder, this one genuine, though not originally intended for this purpose. Full spectrum analysis, confirming radiation markers and medical contraindications. As Volume 50 reviewed the document, Tila pressed closer against her mother's side, her large eyes watching the proceedings with obvious anxiety. Nerio, too young to fully understand, nevertheless seemed to absorb the tension around him, remaining unusually still in Suri's arms. After what felt like an eternity, Volume 50 sighed heavily and stamped several forms in succession. Provisional registration approved. Full family unit status, pending final review by Station Command. He slid 4 registration chips across the desk. These will grant basic station access and ration allocation. Resettlement applications can be filed after the 30-day waiting period. I managed to hide my dismay at this last detail. 30 days was far longer than I'd hoped for, and possibly longer than we had before the rumored streamlining reached our sector. Thank you, I said, gathering the precious chips. We appreciate your efficiency. As we walked away, I guided the family through the least traffic corridors toward my quarters. Only when we were safely inside with the door sealed did I allow myself to breathe normally again. We've cleared the first hurdle, I told Suri, distributing the registration chips. These need to be kept with you at all times. They're your protection if security stops you. Suri nodded, carefully securing her chip and helping Tila with hers. And now we wait for the next transport manifest to LN3. I hesitated. There's a complication, though. The 30-day waiting period. I heard, Suri said grimly. We don't have 30 days, do we? I don't think so. Not with the new directives Teller mentioned. I moved to my personal console, bringing up the latest station bulletins. There's something else we need to consider. My quarters are registered for a single occupant. We need to make this arrangement appear legitimate. Suri's expression remained carefully neutral. You mean we must live together? Yes. It's not ideal, but it's necessary, she finished for me. We've already crossed that line, human. There's no purpose in hesitation now. There was wisdom in her pragmatism. I'll arrange for larger quarters. As a family unit, we qualify for expanded space. As I spoke, I noticed Tila had moved to the small viewport that offered a narrow glimpse of the station's exterior, the real starfield beyond the artificial atmosphere. She had retrieved a small object from her pocket, what appeared to be a slim stylus with a faint luminescent tip. What's that? I asked gently. Tila startled slightly, then relaxed when she saw it was me. It's Father's drawing light, she said, holding it carefully. It doesn't work very well anymore. The power is almost gone. I moved closer, seeing now that she had been attempting to trace patterns on the viewport surface. What were you drawing? Home, she said simply. The great arch and the crystal lakes. Her small fingers traced the outline only she could see. Mama says we can't go back, but I don't want to forget what it looked like. Something twisted in my chest. May I see? I asked. After a moment's hesitation, Tila offered me the stylus. It was indeed nearly depleted, the light, flickering weakly as I tested it against my palm. I might be able to recharge this, I told her, examining the base where a standard power cell would be housed. We have compatible cells in the medical bay. Tila's expression brightened momentarily, then fell. But then we'd use up medicine power. Not medicine power, I assured her. Different systems. And there are some benefits to being the person who fixes the medical equipment around here. I offered her a smile. No one questions where all the power cells go. For the first time, I saw Tila smile. A small, hesitant expression that nonetheless transformed her solemn face. From across the room, I caught Suri watching us, something unreadable in her eyes. When she noticed my attention, she turned away, busying herself with settling Nerio onto the room's single sleep platform. It's not much, I acknowledged, glancing around at my sparse quarters. But it's a start. A start, Suri echoed, her voice so quiet I almost missed it. Yes, perhaps it is. The following days established a tenuous routine. Our fraudulent registration granted us access to the larger family quarters I'd requested, a 2-room unit that offered marginally more space than my previous accommodations. Suri and the children took the bedroom, while I made do with a sleep mat in the main living area. Tila's drawing light, successfully recharged, became her constant companion. She covered the walls of their room with luminescent sketches that faded within hours, ephemeral memories of Yuzia that she refused to let disappear completely. Nerio, recovering from his illness, grew more animated each day, his natural childhood curiosity gradually emerging from beneath layers of fear and deprivation. Suri maintained her dignity and distance, unfailingly polite, but careful to establish boundaries around our arrangement. I respected her caution. Trust was a luxury few refugees could afford. On the 7th day, I returned from my shift at the medical bay to find Suri standing rigid in the center of our quarters, a station-wide bulletin displayed on the view screen. They've moved up the timeline, she said without preamble. The deportation processing begins tomorrow. I scanned the bulletin quickly, my stomach dropping. Sector by sector verification of all registered individuals. I read aloud. Immediate removal of those with provisional or incomplete status. Our provisional family registration would not survive close scrutiny. Once they began cross-referencing with central databases, the fabrication would be obvious. How long until they reach our sector? Suri asked, her voice steady despite the fear I could see in her eyes. I calculated quickly. 3 days. For at most. Tila appeared in the bedroom doorway, clutching her drawing light. Are we leaving again, Mama? Suri knelt beside her daughter, smoothing a hand over her hair. Perhaps, little one, but not alone this time. I made a decision then, one I'd been considering since first seeing the transport manifest updates. There's a medical supply transport scheduled for LN3 departure in 2 days. As senior medical officer, I can authorize personnel to accompany critical supplies. Would that bypass the verification process? Suri asked. Partially. Medical priority still requires basic security clearance, but it's expedited. They check the chips, but not the full background. I hesitated. There's a risk. If we're caught attempting to circumvent standard procedures. What's the alternative? Suri's gaze was direct. Deportation for me and my children? Return to a world where we have no status, no protection. She was right, of course. The risk of staying had become greater than the risk of attempted escape. Then we prepare, I said, quietly. Only essential items we can carry inconspicuously. We've had practice with that, Suri replied, a hint of grim humor in her voice. That night, after the children were asleep, Suri joined me in the main room, where I was reviewing the transport schedules and security rotation patterns. If we succeed, she said, settling on the edge of the chair opposite me. What then? On LN3. It was a question I'd avoided asking myself. Resettlement colonies need medical personnel. I can secure a position, establish legitimate residency for all of us. I glanced up from the screen. After that, I don't know. The arrangement would have served its purpose once you and the children have permanent status. Suri studied me with that penetrating gaze I'd come to recognize. You would dissolve our union then? That would be your decision, I said carefully. The legal bond would have security rights. You would be free to choose your path forward. Freedom of choice, she murmured. A novel concept after these past years. She was silent for a moment. Then, you surprised me, human. When I first approached you, desperate and expecting rejection, I saw only a potential. Protector, a necessary shield. I did not expect to find. She seemed to search for the right word, an ally. Is that what we are? Allies, are we not? United against common adversaries. Bureaucracy, prejudice, the callousness of systems too large to see individual suffering. Her lips curved in a slight smile. Perhaps even something more. The children have grown fond of you. And I of them, I admitted, thinking of Tila's serious face transformed by rare smiles, of Nerio's gradual transformation from fearful silence to cautious curiosity. Tila asked me yesterday if you were to be her new father, Suri said, watching my reaction carefully. I told her our arrangement was more complicated than that. What did she say? She said complications didn't matter. That you fixed broken things, like her drawing light, like Nerio's sickness. That perhaps you could fix our broken family too. Suri's expression softened slightly. Children have a way of simplifying what adults make complex. I didn't know how to respond to that. The idea of being more than a temporary solution, more than an escape route, had not been part of my calculations. We should focus on getting to LN3, I said finally. Everything else can be decided once we're safe. Suri nodded, rising gracefully. Yes, safety first. But remember, Adrian, I noted it was the first time she'd used my name. Safety is not the same as living. With that cryptic statement, she returned to her children, leaving me with an unexpected warmth spreading through my chest, and a new determination to ensure that all of us would have the chance not just to be safe, but to truly live again. Security officer Teller found me as I was leaving the medical bay the following day. Adrian, he called, his thin face set in suspicious lines. A word. I paused, keeping my expression neutral despite the alarm bells ringing internally. Of course. Your family registration, he said without preamble. Something doesn't add up. My heart rate increased, but years of emergency medicine had taught me to function under pressure. Is there a problem with our documentation? The timing is convenient, Teller remarked. Family showing up just as resettlement priorities are announced. Convenient for whom? I countered. They've been searching for me since the evacuation of Lower Usia. The cross-species reunion network finally made the connection. Teller's eyes narrowed. And yet, no record of your marriage exists in the central database. So they've begun cross-referencing already. earlier than I'd anticipated. Lower Uzia's central records were destroyed in the bombardment, I said smoothly, as were millions of others. That's why the coalition established Protocol 772 for recognition of undocumented unions based on testimonial evidence. I'm familiar with the protocol, Teller replied. I'm also familiar with desperate people creating convenient fictions. I met his gaze steadily. Is there an official inquiry, Officer Teller? If so, I'll need to file a response through proper channels. Otherwise, I have patients waiting. For a moment, I thought he would press further. Instead, he stepped back slightly. No official inquiry. Yet. But the verification team reaches this sector tomorrow. I suggest you have your testimonial evidence ready. He walked away, leaving me with the certainty that our timeline had just contracted dramatically. We couldn't wait for the medical transport. We needed to move tonight. I returned to our quarters to find Suri already packing, her movements efficient and practiced. You felt it too, I said, not bothering with explanations. She nodded. The distribution center was unusually crowded today. People are preparing to run. Teller confronted me. They're cross-referencing registrations against the central database. Suri's hands stilled momentarily. How long do we have? Hours, not days. The verification team arrives tomorrow. She absorbed this with remarkable composure. Then we leave tonight. I prepared what we can carry. 3 small packs sat near the door, pathetically small to contain all that remained of their lives. Tila's drawing light, Suri's memory globe that still held fragmentary images of her lost home. The medical kit I'd assembled with supplies that might prove valuable where we were going. Where are the children? I asked, noticing the unusual quiet. With Merrick, Suri replied. He offered to show them the hydroponics garden. I trusted it would be safe. It is, I assured her. Merrick understands what it means to be displaced. He won't betray us. As if summoned by our discussion, the door chimed, announcing their return. Tila burst in, her face animated with excitement, clutching something green in her small hands. Look what we grew, she exclaimed, holding up a tiny sprout nestled in a small container of nutrient gel. Merrick says it's a starflower. It'll have blue petals when it blooms. Nerio followed behind her, his expression more reserved, but eyes bright with shared enthusiasm. Merrick lingered in the doorway, his gaze quickly taking in our packed bags. Tonight? He asked quietly. I nodded. Can you help us reach Base 7 without being seen? The maintenance tunnels, he replied without hesitation. I've been mapping them for months. Security only patrols the main junctions. Suri knelt before her children, gently taking Tila's precious plant and setting it aside. Listen carefully, she said, her voice gentle but serious. We need to leave Port Renas sooner than we planned. Tonight. Tila's excitement faded. Another ship? Yes. A better one this time, Suri promised. To a place with real soil where your starflower can truly grow. Nerio's small hand found his mother's. Will there be bad men there too? The innocent question cut through me like a blade. What right did I have to promise these children safety in a universe that had already taught them such harsh lessons? LN3 is different, I said, kneeling beside Suri. It's a new colony world. People there are too busy building homes and growing food to worry about old prejudices. I hope that wasn't a lie. We leave in 3 hours, I continued, addressing Merrick. When a shift changes at Central Security. I'll be ready, the young man promised. I need to get some things from my quarters first. After he left, we moved quickly, finalizing preparations with the practiced efficiency of those accustomed to sudden departures. Suri dressed the children in layers, protection against the notorious cold of transport ships. I rechecked the medical supplies, adding last-minute items that might prove valuable in a frontier colony. This transport wasn't meant for passengers, I warned Suri. It'll be cramped, uncomfortable. 8 hours minimum in the cargo hold. We've endured worse, she replied simply. When final preparation was complete, an unexpected quiet fell over our small quarters. Tila had returned to her plant, whispering something to it that I couldn't hear. Nerio had fallen into an exhausted sleep on Suri's lap, his small face finally peaceful. Suri looked up, catching me watching them. You're having doubts, she observed. Not about helping you, I clarified. About LN3. I've painted it as a sanctuary, but the truth is, I don't know what we'll find there. No one ever does, she said softly. That's the nature of hope. It requires a step into the unknown. I don't want to lead you from one disappointment to another. Suri's expression softened fractionally. Adrian, she said, before I found you, my children were starving. We slept in drainage channels. Planetary security forces hunted us as undesirables. Whatever awaits on LN3, we face it standing rather than crawling. Her quiet dignity humbled me. Then we face it together. The moment was interrupted by the station's comm system crackling to life. Attention all sectors. Initiate Security Protocol Gamma 7. Effective immediately, all residential sections are locked down for emergency verification procedures. Repeat, all residents must remain in assigned quarters for mandatory verification. My blood ran cold. They've moved up the timeline again. Suri was already on her feet, gently shaking Nerio awake. How long before they reach this sector? I checked the security feed on my datapad. An hour. Maybe less. The door chimed again, an urgent, repeated signal. I approached cautiously, checking the external camera before opening it to admit a breathless Merrick. They've sealed the main corridors, he reported. Security teams at every intersection. But the maintenance tunnels are still accessible. They'll be checking those too, soon enough, I said grimly. Not all of them, Merrick insisted. There's a subnetwork below the primary maintenance level. It was used during initial station construction, then abandoned when they installed the newer systems. Most people don't even know it exists. How do you know about it? Suri asked, legitimate suspicion in her voice. Merrick's expression darkened momentarily. When I first arrived after Telmach, I couldn't stand being around people. I spent months exploring the forgotten parts of the station. Those tunnels became my sanctuary. I made a swift decision. Show us. He led us to what appeared to be a standard environmental control panel in our quarters washing facility. With practiced movements, he pressed a specific sequence of maintenance codes, causing the panel to slide aside and reveal a narrow passage beyond. It'll be tight, he warned, and dark. The power was diverted years ago. I retrieved emergency light sticks from my medical kit, snapping one to activate its chemical glow. We'll manage. Suri gathered Nerio in her arms while Tila clutched her small pack containing her drawing light and, now, the precious starflower seedling. I shouldered the larger pack, with our essential supplies. Wait, Merrick said suddenly. The verification teams will know someone was here and fled. They'll search harder. He was right. I thought quickly. We need to make it look like we're still here, just not answering the door. Working rapidly, we arranged pillows and blankets on the sleep platforms to approximate bodies. Merrick programmed the environmental controls to maintain normal life sign readings, a trick he'd apparently learned during his time exploring the station systems. That won't fool them for long, I warned. It doesn't need to, Merrick replied. Just long enough for you to reach Base 7. With final preparations complete, we faced the dark passage. Suri went first. Nerio held securely against her chest. Tila followed, her small face set with determination that no child should need to possess. I prepared to enter last, but Merrick caught my arm. I'm coming with you, he said quietly. There's nothing for me here. I wanted to argue, to tell him that stowing away would mean additional risk, additional mouths to feed on LN3. But the resolve in his young face stopped me. How many times had this boy been left behind by those who claimed to care for him? Stay close, I said instead, and seal the panel behind us. The abandoned tunnels were even narrower than Merrick had warned, barely wide enough for an adult to pass through. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of disused machinery and ancient dust. Our light sticks cast eerie blue-green shadows that danced along corroded metal walls. We moved as quickly as possible, Merrick in the lead now, navigating turns and junctions with confident precision. Twice we had to stop and wait in tense silence as security patrols passed through adjacent maintenance corridors, their footsteps and voices carrying through thin bulkheads. How much farther? Suri whispered during one such pause, her arms visibly tiring from carrying Nerio, who had fallen into an uneasy sleep despite our precarious situation. 3 more junctions, Merrick replied. Then we'll emerge near the cargo processing area for Bay 7. I check my wrist chrono. The medical transport departs in 40 minutes. We need to hurry. When we finally reached the access panel that would lead us into the cargo area, Merrick hesitated. There will be workers there. Loading crew, inventory supervisors. I have medical authorization to accompany the supplies, I reminded him. The challenge will be explaining all of you. We could separate, Suri suggested. You approach officially while we find a way to board unseen. I shook my head firmly. No, we stay together. An idea formed. Merrick, your station ID. It still lists you as a medical auxiliary, correct? He nodded. You registered me yourself. Then you're officially assisting me with critical supply transport. I turned to Suri and the children. And your family members being evacuated due to suspected exposure to the respiratory contagion in the Eastern Quadrant. Suri caught on immediately, creating a medical emergency that requires swift removal from the station. Exactly. It explains the rush, the lack of standard departure protocols. It was risky. Creating a fictional contagion threat could cause panic. But we were beyond safe options now. When Merrick unsealed the access panel, we emerged into a dimly lit storage area adjacent to the main cargo processing floor. I could hear the efficient bustle of the loading crew beyond. Taking a deep breath, I stripped off my outer jacket, revealing the medical insignia on my inner uniform. Faded but still recognizable. Follow my lead, I instructed. Look worried but not panicked. Suri, keep Nerio close. His genuine sleep will add credibility to our story. We stepped out onto the main floor with purposeful strides. I headed directly for the shift supervisor, a harried-looking woman checking inventory against her datapad. Supervisor, I called, using my most authoritative medical voice. I need immediate clearance for myself and these individuals to board the LN-3 transport. She looked up, irritation quickly shifting to concern as she took in my medical insignia and the family behind me. This is a cargo transport, medical officer. No passenger clearance. I lowered my voice, creating an air of urgent confidentiality. Possible exposure to the RC-17 pathogen in residential block E. These individuals need immediate quarantine transfer to LN-3's medical facilities. Her eyes widened. RC-17 was a real respiratory virus. Rare, but documented in the station's medical database. Serious enough to warrant evacuation, not deadly enough to trigger a station-wide lockdown. I don't have authorization for emergency medical transport, she protested. I produced my datapad, displaying the medical priority codes I generated hours earlier. Section 47 Alpha of Station Protocol authorizes senior medical personnel to commandeer transport resources in cases of contagion risk. She hesitated, clearly weighing the regulatory violation against the potential risk of contagion. The transport leaves in 30 minutes. Bay doors seal in 20. We'll be ready, I promised. With obvious reluctance, she inputted an override code into her datapad. Cargo Bay 3 has environmental controls. It's meant for sensitive medical supplies anyway. She glanced at the children. It won't be comfortable. Comfort is secondary to containment, I replied with appropriate gravity. As she moved away to inform the loading crew, Suri stepped closer to me. That was impressively convincing, she murmured. Years of practice delivering bad news with authority, I replied quietly. Come on, let's board before someone with actual knowledge of quarantine protocols shows up. Cargo Bay 3 was indeed equipped with basic environmental controls, though comfort would have been a generous description of the space. Medical supply crates lined the walls, secured with mesh webbing for transport. The only open floor space was barely large enough for the 4 of us, 5 now, with Merrick, to sit closely together. Secure yourselves as best you can, I advised, showing them how to use the cargo webbing as makeshift restraints. Takeoff will be rough. These transports aren't designed for passenger comfort. As we settled in, the massive bay doors began their closing sequence, sealing with a pneumatic hiss that finalized our commitment. There was no turning back now. Tila, wedged between her mother and the wall, looked up at the narrow strip of lights running along the ceiling. "Are we really going to New World?" she asked, her voice small but steady. "Yes," I told her, summoning confidence I didn't entirely feel. "A world with open skies and room to grow. Like my starflower?" I smiled at her. "Exactly like your starflower." The transport engines engaged with a deep, vibrating rumble that resonated through the metal floor. Nerio stirred in Suri's arms, whimpering softly at the unfamiliar sensation. Merrick, who had said little since boarding, gripped the webbing with white-knuckled tension. As the initial surge of acceleration pressed us against the bulkhead, I found Suri's gaze fixed on me across the dim cargo bay. In the strobing emergency lights, her expression was unreadable, but her posture remained unwavering. Spine straight, chin lifted, a living embodiment of dignity in the face of uncertainty. The station klaxons blared in the distance, whether for our unauthorized departure or some unrelated emergency. I couldn't tell. Either way, Port Renos and its stifling bureaucracy were falling away behind us as we accelerated toward the jump point that would carry us to LN3. 8 hours of cramped discomfort lay ahead, followed by whatever awaited us on a frontier colony world. But as the transport broke free of the station's gravitational controls, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before Telmach. The sensation of a genuine future, unfolding with possibilities beyond mere survival. The journey to LN3 was exactly as uncomfortable as I'd predicted. The cargo bay's environmental controls maintained breathable air and survivable temperature, but did little to cushion the bone-jarring vibrations of a vessel designed for freight rather than passengers. Sleep came in fitful bursts for all of us. Nerio, surprisingly, adapted best, curling against his mother's chest and finding rest despite the noise and movement. Tila fought valiantly against exhaustion, determined to witness every moment of our escape, until finally succumbing against Merrick's shoulder. The young man himself seemed too wound with nervous energy to rest, his eyes constantly moving between the sealed bay door and the small external viewport that offered occasional glimpses of the star-streaked void outside. Suri and I remained awake through most of the journey, our backs pressed against opposite walls of the cramped space, occasionally exchanging glances that conveyed more than words could have in that moment. Near what my chronometer indicated was the 6th hour, the transport's engines changed pitch, signaling our approach to LN3's orbital station. "We'll need a plan for disembarkation," I said quietly, not wanting to disturb the sleeping children. "The contagion story won't hold once we reach colonial authorities. Could we simply disappear into the colony?" Merrick suggested. "Avoid authorities altogether?" I shook my head. LN3 is still developing. Everyone passes through central processing. Resources are carefully allocated. "My skills," Suri spoke up unexpectedly. "On Uzia, before the war, I was a botanical engineer specializing in adaptive cultivation. That knowledge should have value on a new colony world." This was the first I'd heard of her professional background. "Why didn't you mention this before?" A shadow passed across her face. "When they executed my husband and stripped our status, they also revoked all professional certifications. I was legally barred from practicing my field. After enough time, one stops thinking of oneself in those terms." "LN3 would value such expertise," I said, mind racing with possibilities. "Their terraforming is still in early stages. Native soil composition has been challenging for Earth-derived crops." "I could help with that," she said, a hint of professional confidence entering her voice for the first time. Adaptive hybridization was my specialty. The transport lurched suddenly, the change in momentum signaling our final approach to the orbital dock. The movement woke Tila, who blinked sleepily and immediately checked on her precious plant container. "Are we there?" she asked. "Almost," I told her. "We're docking at the orbital station. From there, we'll take a shuttle to the surface." Her eyes widened. "The real surface? With real ground?" "Real ground," I confirmed. Though I should warn you, LN3's landscape isn't like Usea. It's still being terraformed. Some areas are quite raw. Raw, Merrick echoed. Volcanic activity. Mineral deposits still being processed by engineered bacteria. Some regions have unusual coloration. Purplish soil, reddish vegetation. Tila looked intrigued rather than dismayed by this description. Different colors are good, she declared with childish certainty. Boring things are all the same color. A series of metallic clangs reverberated through the hull as docking clamps engaged. Moments later, the cargo bay's external temperature sensors began registering the equalizing pressure of the station's atmosphere. When the doors opened, I instructed quickly, stay together. Follow my lead. If questioned, let me do the talking. The bay doors retracted with a pneumatic hiss, revealing not the expected cargo handling team, but four colonial security officers in the distinctive gray and green uniforms of LN3's administration. Medical Transport MV 347, announced the lead officer, consulting her datapad. Manifest indicates medical supplies only. No registered passengers. Her eyes narrowed as she took in our group. Would someone care to explain? I stepped forward, medical credentials already displayed on my datapad. Emergency medical evacuation from Port Renos. I'm Medical Officer Adrian, accompanying critical supplies and exposed personnel. The officer's expression remained skeptical. We received no notification of contamination risk. The situation developed rapidly. I replied smoothly. Port Renos communications have been unreliable since the last solar flare activity. Convenient, she remarked. And these individuals are my family, I stated firmly, the words feeling surprisingly natural. And my medical assistant. I nodded toward Merrick. All potentially exposed to a respiratory pathogen in the station's eastern quadrant. The officer signaled to her colleagues, who maintained a cautious distance but didn't draw weapons. A positive sign, at least. You understand that unauthorized passenger transport is a serious violation of colonial regulation, she continued. Particularly in a colony with limited resources. I understand that human lives take precedence over bureaucratic procedures. I countered, allowing a calculated edge to enter my voice. Would you prefer I had left potentially contagious civilians in an overcrowded refugee station? Her expression softened marginally. Colony protocol requires all new arrivals to undergo full medical screening and skills assessment before surface clearance. Of course, I agreed readily. We welcome proper screening. My family's safety is my priority. She studied us for a moment longer, then gestured toward the exit. Processing is on level 3. You'll remain in quarantine until medical confirms your status. As we were escorted through the orbital station's sterile corridors, I caught snippets of conversation between the security officers walking behind us. Another group claiming refugee status. Central Admin is getting tired of Port Renos dumping their problems. At least these ones have a medical professional with them. The processing center was a stark, efficient facility clearly designed to handle much larger groups than our small family unit. We were directed to separate medical scanning chambers, the children clinging to Suri until a kindly-looking technician assured them the process was painless and brief. The comprehensive scan would reveal more than I had claimed about our supposed exposure. It would show our actual medical histories, including the children's mixed heritage and any treatments we'd received. I could only hope that LN3's colonial administration was more concerned with useful skills than genetic backgrounds. When we were reunited after screening, Suri's expression was tense but controlled. They took samples, she whispered. Blood. Tissue. More than standard procedure. Before I could respond, we were ushered into a sterile interview room where a colonial administrator waited, silver-gray uniform immaculate, expression impassive as she reviewed data on her screen. Well, she said finally, looking up at us. You've created quite a situation, Medical Officer Adrian. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. No evidence of the respiratory pathogen you claimed, she noted. However, medical scans indicate recent malnutrition in the children and the woman, she glanced at Suri, shows stress markers consistent with prolonged inadequate shelter and nutrition. She set the datapad down deliberately. In other words, classic refugee indicators, not contagion exposure. Their health was my concern, I stated. The means of transport was secondary. And falsifying a medical emergency was your solution? Her tone was more curious than accusatory. Port Renos was initiating mass deportation of provisional status residents. I explained. These children would have been returned to a world where they face persecution for their mixed heritage. The administrator studied the children thoughtfully. Tila stood straight-backed beside her mother, while Nerio half hid behind Suri's legs, regarding the stranger with wide, cautious eyes. You're aware that LN3 has strict immigration protocols, the administrator continued. Resources are carefully managed during this terraforming phase. I'm aware, ignorant. I'm also aware that the colony has posted multiple requests for medical personnel and agricultural specialists. She raised an eyebrow. And you qualify? I have 8 years of emergency medical training, including 3 in a resource-constrained environment. I gestured towards Suri, and she is a botanical engineer specializing in adaptive cultivation, expertise that would be valuable for your terraforming challenges. The administrator's expression shifted slightly, interest flickering behind her professional facade. That's a convenient claim. Test her knowledge, I suggested. She can demonstrate her expertise. Suri stepped forward. The Western continent's soil alkalinity issues reported in last month's colonial bulletin could be addressed through modified rhizome systems rather than chemical adjustment. I developed similar solutions during the early restoration of Uzia's northern provinces after the ionic contamination of the war. The technical specificity of her statement clearly caught the administrator's attention. She made a note on her datapad. And the young man? She asked, nodding toward Merrick. Merrick squared his shoulders. I've worked maintenance systems in Port Renos for 2 years. Before that, I assisted with emergency infrastructure repairs after Telmac. I know how to keep things working with limited parts. The administrator considered us all for a long moment. LN3 is not a refugee center, she said finally. It's a working colony with real challenges and limited margins for error. Everyone contributes. That's all we ask for, I replied. The opportunity to contribute, to build something. She nodded once, decision made. Provisional residency granted, pending skills verification and colonial integration training. Standard 6-month probationary period applies. Her expression softened marginally as she glanced at the children. The Education Center has recently established a youth section. All colonial children are required to attend. Tila looked simultaneously intrigued and apprehensive at this announcement. Surface transport departs in 2 hours. The administrator continued, rising to signal the end of our interview. Temporary housing will be assigned upon arrival. Report to the Skills Assessment Center tomorrow at first bell. After she left, we remained in the interview room, the reality of our situation finally beginning to settle. We made it, Merrick said quietly, disbelief coloring his voice. We actually made it. Suri's posture relaxed for the first time since we'd left Port Renos. Provisional residency, she repeated. A beginning. A real beginning, I agreed. Not just survival. 2 hours later, we boarded the surface transport, a sturdy craft designed to navigate LN3's still unpredictable atmosphere. As we descended through swirling clouds tinged with the faintest purple hue, I found myself seated beside Suri. The children and Merrick pressed against the viewport on the other side of the cabin, eagerly watching the approaching landscape. Are you afraid? I asked quietly, for her ears only. She considered the question with her typical thoughtfulness. Not afraid, she decided. Cautious. Hope has betrayed me before. LN3 won't be perfect, I acknowledged. New colonies rarely are. There will be hardships, but not the same ones, she replied, a subtle distinction that carried significant weight. The transport broke through the final layer of clouds, revealing LN3's surface spread below us, a striking mosaic of deep crimson vegetation against purplish-black soil, interrupted by the geometric patterns of the colonial settlement. Buildings constructed of local stone and imported composites formed concentric rings around a central hub, with agricultural sectors extending outward in carefully planned segments. "Look, Mama," Tila exclaimed, pointing excitedly. "The ground is purple, like in my drawings." Suri moved to join her children at the viewport, her expression softening as she took in their wonder. Even Nerio had emerged from his usual quiet caution, small hands pressed against the transparent surface as he witnessed his first planetary landing. As the transport descended toward the landing field, I remained in my seat, watching this family. My family, at least on paper, embraced their first moments of genuine freedom. Whatever challenges awaited us on LN3's surface, we would face them together. The landing was smoother than I expected, the transport settling onto the purplish-black soil with only a gentle bump. Through the viewport, I could see colonial workers moving efficiently around a landing field, preparing to unload cargo and process the new arrivals. "Welcome to LN3 Colony," announced the transport pilot over the comm system. "Current local time is 1437. Atmospheric composition is within standard parameters. Temperature is 24 degrees Celsius. Please proceed to the central reception area for housing assignments and orientation." The cabin door opened, admitting a wash of alien air, not unpleasant, but distinctly different from the recycled atmosphere of Port Renos. There was a mineral quality to it, a faint tang that spoke of the ongoing terraforming process. We disembarked together, stepping onto LN3's soil for the first time. Tila immediately crouched down, reaching to touch the purplish-black ground with wondering fingers. "It's warm," she marveled. "And it sparkles." She was right. Tiny crystalline flecks were visible in the soil, catching the light of LN3's sun, a slightly deeper gold than Earth standard, casting everything in a rich, amber glow. The colonial settlement spread before us, busy with purposeful activity. Unlike Port Renos's makeshift structures and repurposed spaces, LN3 had been planned and built with intention. The buildings were simple but solid, constructed for efficiency and durability rather than aesthetics. Yet there was a beauty in their functionality. Suri lifted her face to the open sky, the real sky, not a projection, and drew a deep breath. Something in her expression shifted, a relaxing of muscles that had been tensed for so long they'd become a part of her. "It smells like possibility," she said softly. The central reception area was housed in a low, wide building near the landing field. Inside, we joined a small queue of new arrivals. Most appear to be specialists recruited for specific colonial needs, judging by their equipment and attire. When our turn came, a harried but efficient colonial officer checked our newly issued identification against his records. "Family Unit Adrian," he confirmed. 2 adults, 2 children, plus 1 additional adult. Assigned to Residential Sector 7, Unit 42B. He handed over a small data chip. "This will access your quarters and contains basic colonial information. Report to the Skills Assessment Center at first bell tomorrow." Our assigned housing turned out to be a modest prefabricated structure at the outer edge of the settlement. A single-level dwelling with 2 small bedrooms, a common area, and basic utilities. The furnishings were sparse but functional. Sleep platforms with actual mattresses, a cooking unit, a sanitation facility with genuine water rather than sonic cleansing. "It's a palace," Merrick breathed, running his hand along a solid wall. Not the flexible partition material of Port Renos, but actual stabilized composite. Nerio ventured hesitantly into the second bedroom, his small face lighting with surprise when he discovered a child-sized sleep platform. "For me?" he asked, the longest sentence I'd heard from him since we'd met. "For you and your sister," Suri confirmed, her voice tight with emotion she was clearly trying to control. Tila had already claimed the small shelf unit beside the sleep platform, carefully placing her starflower seedling where it would catch light from the room's window. "Will it grow here, Mama?" she asked. Suri knelt beside her daughter. "It will," she promised. Different than on Uzia, perhaps, but strong in its own way. As the children explored their new home, Merrick approached me awkwardly. I should find my own quarters, he said. I don't want to impose on your family. The colonial officer assigned you here, I reminded him. And there's space in the common area. I hesitated, then added, unless you prefer separate housing. He shook his head. Quickly. No, I don't want to intrude. Suri joined our conversation. You helped us escape Port Renos, she said. You're part of this now, Merrick. The young man's shoulders relaxed slightly, tension I hadn't fully registered until it dissipated. Thank you, he said simply. That evening, we shared our first meal in our new home, standard colonial rations, but fresh rather than the preserved supplies of Port Renos. We sat together around the small table. An unexpected family formed from the fragments of lives disrupted by war and prejudice. After the children had been settled into their new sleep platform, marveling at the luxury of actual blankets and privacy, I found Suri standing at the dwelling's main window, looking out at Ellen 3's night sky. The unfamiliar stars scattered across the deep purple black of the alien heavens cast subtle shadows across her face. Second thoughts? I asked, moving to stand beside her. She shook her head. Trying to believe it's real, she corrected. That we won't wake tomorrow back in a drainage channel or detention center. It's real, I assured her. Provisional residency now. Full colonial status in 6 months if all goes well. And what of us? She asked, turning to face me directly. This arrangement. When the provisional period ends and we've secured our status. What then? It was the question that had hovered between us since Port Renos, the undefined future beyond our immediate goal of escape. That would be your decision, I said carefully. The legal bond would have served its purpose. You would be free to choose your path forward. And if my choice is to maintain what we've begun. Her gaze was steady, evaluating. Begun. This unusual family. You, me, the children, even Merrick, brought together by necessity. But perhaps, she seemed to search for the right words, perhaps becoming something chosen rather than forced. Something warm unfurled in my chest. Hope. I realized a sensation so long absent I'd nearly forgotten its contours. I would welcome that choice, I told her honestly. I've spent 3 years at Port Renos punishing myself for those I couldn't save at Telmac, living half a life. I gestured to encompass our small dwelling, the sleeping children, the alien world beyond our window. This feels like a whole life again. Suri's expression softened. They told me I was worthless without a male guardian, she said quietly. A cultural relic given new power by fear and war. I believed them for a time, internalized their judgment because survival required it. Her chin lifted slightly. Here. I can be valued for my knowledge, my skills. My children can grow without shame for their heritage. And what of me? I asked. What place would I have in this choice of yours? A hint of a smile touched her lips, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. Not my guardian or protector, though you've been both. Not merely a convenient legal fiction. She reached out, her 6-fingered hand hesitating briefly before resting lightly on mine. A partner, perhaps. In building whatever life Ellen 3 allows us to create. I turn my hand to clasp hers gently. I would like that very much. From the bedroom doorway came a small sound. Tila, watching us with solemn eyes, her drawing light clutched in one hand. Are you going to be our family for real now? She asked directly, with a child's unerring instinct for the heart of matter. Suri extended her free hand toward her daughter. Would you like that, little one? Tila nodded decisively. You fix broken things, she said, looking at me. We were broken when we found you. Not just hungry and cold. Broken inside. You weren't broken, I corrected gently. Just hurt. There's a difference. She considered this distinction with surprising seriousness. Then you help hurt things heal, she decided. That's important too. It is, I agreed, feeling a lump form in my throat. Tila came forward, taking her mother's outstretched hand. Nerio wants a story, she announced, about Ellen 3 and why the ground is purple. I told him you would know. Suri smiled at her daughter. I don't know yet, she admitted, but we can learn together. Tomorrow, I suggested, we could visit the colonial laboratory, see what they've discovered about Ellen 3's soil. Start understanding our new home. I'd like that, Suri said, and in her voice was the same cautious hope I felt taking root within my own heart. As I helped Tila back to bed, telling an improvised story about purple soil and the resilient plants learning to grow in it, I thought about the strange, winding path that had led us all to this moment. From the ashes of Telmac to the sterile desperation of Port Renos, to this small dwelling on an alien world being reshaped by human determination. Later, as LN3's larger moon rose above the horizon, casting a silvery gold light across our new home, Suri and I sat together, in companionable silence, watching the unfamiliar constellations wheel slowly overhead. They said I was worthless without a male, she murmured, almost to herself. But here, under this sky, I feel my worth returning, not because of you or any external validation, but because I can finally breathe without fear. And your children? I asked. They will grow knowing they are worthy because they exist, not because of who protects them or what bloodlines they carry, she replied with quiet certainty. That is the greatest gift LN3 offers, a chance to leave old prejudices behind. As we sat beneath alien stars, I felt the weight of Telmac lift slightly from my shoulders. The ghosts would never fully vanish, but perhaps they could rest easier knowing I had found a way to honor their memory. By helping create the family before me, by building something lasting from the ashes of loss. The 6-month probationary period passed more quickly than any of us anticipated. LN3's colony operated on the principle that everyone contributed according to their abilities, and we each found our place within its growing community. I was assigned to the medical center, where my emergency experience proved valuable as colonists explored the still wild regions beyond the settlement. Injuries from unexpected terrain features or reactions to unclassified flora kept my skills sharp, while the stability of the colony allowed me to develop expertise beyond the crisis medicine of my core days. Suri's botanical knowledge proved even more essential than we'd hoped. The colony's agricultural struggles had centered around adapting earth crops to LN3's unique soil composition. Within weeks, her experimental hybrid strains were showing promising results, earning her a permanent position on the Terraforming Advisory Council. Merrick found his calling in the maintenance of the colony's environmental systems, his experience navigating Port Renos's jury-rigged infrastructure giving him a unique perspective on optimizing LN3's more advanced but still developing technologies. The children flourished most dramatically of all. The colony's education center exposed them to knowledge beyond survival skills, nurturing their natural curiosities. Tila's artistic talents expanded beyond her treasure-drawing light to include collaborative murals adorning the community gathering spaces, while Nerio gradually emerged from his protective shell to reveal an aptitude for mechanical systems that soon had him shadowing Merrick during his simpler repair rounds. Most importantly, they played. After years of hiding and fear, they experienced the fundamental childhood right of carefree joy, running across LN3's purplish soil, building structures from local stone, joining other colonial children in games that mixed Earth traditions with innovations inspired by their new home. On the morning marking exactly 6 months since our arrival, our family gathered in our dwelling. Expanded now with a small additional room constructed during community building days, preparing for the formal citizenship ceremony that would convert our provisional status to permanent residency. Tila proudly wore a new tunic embroidered with patterns inspired by both Yuzian traditions and LN3's distinctive flora. Her starflower plant, now thriving in adapted soil, had produced its first blossoms, deep blue petals with golden centers that she had carefully preserved for this occasion, wearing one pinned to her collar. "Will they ask us questions?" she wondered, smoothing her tunic nervously. "About why we want to stay?" "No questions," I assured her. "We've already proven ourselves by contributing to the colony." Nerio, dressed in similar new clothes, looked up from the small mechanical puzzle Merrick had constructed for him. "Are we really staying forever?" "This is our home now," Suri told him, adjusting his collar with gentle hands that no longer showed the desperate tension of our first days together. Forever. The Colonial Administration Center was filled with families and individuals like ourselves, those who had arrived during the same transport cycle and successfully completed their probationary periods. The ceremony itself was refreshingly simple, a pragmatic reflection of colonial values that prioritize contribution over ceremony. Administrator Levhan, who had overseen our initial processing 6 months earlier, called each family unit forward to receive their permanent residency markers, small crystalline chips embedded with their colony identification and rights. Family Unit Adrian, she announced, and we stepped forward together, Suri and I, Tila and Nerio between us, Merrick slightly behind, but undeniably part of our unit. As she presented us with our residency markers, Administrator Levhan added something unusual. The Colonial Council wishes to formally recognize botanical engineer Suri's contributions to the Eastern Agricultural Project. Her adaptive hybrids have increased yield by 37% in previously unproductive sectors. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the gathered colonists. Suri accepted the recognition with characteristic dignity, but I could see the profound impact in her eyes, professional acknowledgement based solely on her contributions, not her status or connections. Later that evening, the colony held a celebration in the central gathering space. Tables laden with food, much of it grown from Suri's hybrid crops, stretched across the plaza. Music played from various cultural traditions, merged and transformed like the people who had brought them to this distant world. As twilight deepened into Ellen III's stunning night, with its twin moons casting complementary gold and silver light across the settlement, I found myself standing slightly apart, watching our family engage with the community we now officially belong to. Merrick was demonstrating a mechanical puzzle to a group of fascinated younger colonists. Nerio had overcome his usual shyness to join a game with children his age, his laughter carrying clearly across the plaza. Tila was explaining her artwork to an elderly colonist, gesturing enthusiastically toward the mural she had helped create on the gathering hall's eastern wall. And Suri, my partner in this unexpected journey, was deep in conversation with other scientists, her hands moving expressively as she detailed some botanical concept, respected and valued for her knowledge alone. Quite a change from Port Renos, observed a voice beside me. I turned to find Administrator Levhan, her usual formal demeanor softened by the celebration. In every possible way, I agreed. Your family has integrated remarkably well, she noted, particularly considering the circumstances of your arrival. I tensed slightly, but her expression held no accusation. You knew our story wasn't entirely truthful. Ellen III needs people who will do whatever necessary to protect their families and contribute to our future, she replied simply. Your methods of arrival concern me less than your reasons for coming. She gestured towards Suri and the children, and those reasons have proven themselves worthy. As she moved away to greet other colonists, I felt a presence at my side. Suri, her eyes reflecting the golden light of the larger moon. What did the administrator want? She asked. To confirm what she already knew, I replied, that we belong here. Suri's expression softened as she watched Tila demonstrating a Yuzian dance step to a fascinated colonial child. A year ago, I was hiding in drainage channels, told I was worthless without male protection, terrified my children would be taken because of their mixed heritage. She turned to face me fully, allowing me to see the emotion she no longer felt compelled to hide. Now my expertise is valued, my children are thriving, and I have a partner who sees me as equal. Not just equal, I corrected gently. Exceptional in your own right. The formal nature of our initial arrangement had gradually transformed over the months, evolving from necessity into genuine connection. The dwelling we shared had become a true home, filled with the everyday rhythms of family life. Morning meals taken together, evening stories for the children, quiet conversations under alien stars. They still say it, you know, Suri said quietly, back on Yuzia, that a woman alone has no value. that mixed heritage children are lesser. Entire worlds still believe such things. And yet, here we are, I replied, gesturing to the thriving colony around us, where contribution mattered more than origin or status. Perhaps LN3 can become a model for something better. Perhaps, she agreed. Though changing entrenched beliefs requires more than one successful example. Her expression grew thoughtful. I've been invited to join the outreach committee, establishing contacts with other colonial worlds facing similar agricultural challenges. You should accept, I encouraged. Your methods deserve wider implementation. Her smile held a hint of something new, ambition, perhaps, or the recognition of her potential impact beyond our immediate community. I already have. They're sending a delegation to Helios Station next month. I'll be leading the agricultural team. Pride swelled within me. The woman they called worthless, now leading intercolonial scientific exchange. With my family support, she amended. This journey has taught me that independence doesn't mean isolation. True strength comes from meaningful connection. As if summoned by our conversation, Tila ran up to us, her face flushed with excitement. Mama, Adrian, the community leaders say we can plant a family tree in the new memorial garden. Everyone who became permanent today gets to plant one. The memorial garden had been established on a gently sloping hill overlooking the settlement, a place where colonists could honor their past while literally putting down roots in their new home. What kind of tree should we choose? Suri asked her daughter. Tila didn't hesitate. A starflower tree, like the ones you told me about from Uzia, but changed to grow here. Like us. The wisdom in her innocent suggestion struck me deeply. Like the hybrid plants Suri developed, our family had been transformed by necessity, adapting to new conditions while preserving our essential nature. A perfect choice, I agreed, taking Tila's hand as Suri gathered Nerio from his game. Merrick joined us as we made our way to the memorial garden, where other families were already engaged in the planting ritual. The colony's botanists had prepared saplings adapted for LN3's soil, each one representing a different world of origin, modified to thrive in their new environment. As Suri had predicted, Tila's starflower sapling wouldn't grow identical to its Uzian ancestors, but would develop its own unique characteristics while honoring its heritage. As we carefully placed the sapling into LN3's purplish soil, each adding a handful of earth around its delicate roots, I felt the symbolic weight of the moment. This tree would grow as our family grew, putting down roots that would hold firm against whatever storms might come. Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep, exhausted from celebration and emotion, Suri and I stood in the doorway of our home, looking up at LN3's stunning night sky. When I first heard those words, that I was worthless without a male guardian, I believed them, Suri admitted quietly. After hearing them enough times from enough authoritative voices, doubt creeps in. And now? I asked. She turned to me, the moonlight illuminating the quiet confidence that had grown in her over these months. Now I know that worth isn't granted by others. It exists in what we build, what we nurture, what we contribute. Her hand found mine in the darkness, in the families we create by choice rather than tradition. As LN3's moons traced their path across the alien sky, casting their dual light over our home and the growing settlement beyond, I thought about the strange, winding journey that had brought us to this moment. From the ashes of Telmac to the desperation of Port Renos, to this hard-won peace on a world still being shaped by human hands. The ghosts of those I couldn't save would always walk with me, but their presence felt different now, less an accusation than a reminder of why every life saved mattered. Every family preserved, every child given the chance to grow under open skies rather than hide in shadows. Suri's words from our first night on LN3 echoed in my memory. This feels like possibility. She had been right. Not just the possibility of survival, but of flourishing, of building something that honored all we had lost while creating something entirely new. As we stood together under alien stars, I silently thanked whatever cosmic chance had placed us in each other's paths. A disgraced medical officer and a widowed botanical engineer, each told by different systems that they had failed, each finding in the other not just salvation, but partnership. They said she was worthless without a male guardian. They said I was dangerous for putting lives above orders. But here, on this distant world being steadily transformed by human determination and alien soil, we had found a simpler truth. Worth isn't assigned by others. It grows from what we nurture, what we protect, what we build with our own hands. Like the starflower tree taking root in Ellen 3's purple soil, adapting while remaining true to its essence. Our unlikely family had found not just a place to survive, but a world in which to thrive. And that, perhaps, was the greatest defiance of all against those who had tried to define our worth by their limited measures. They said I was worthless without a male, Suri murmured, her voice carrying the peaceful certainty of one who has finally escaped a long-believed lie. But here, under the sky, I know better. What do you know? I asked softly. Her answer came with the quiet strength that had carried her through war, loss, and rebirth. That we define our own worth. And together, we are immeasurable.